Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another live coaching call with Nito Marketing. Welcome, welcome. We've got amazing presenters and a lot of attendees because we have been anticipating this conversation. So Mary Lou Cobb and Sue Pritzker, are ready to talk to us about retaining families for the kindergarten year and beyond. Sue and Mary, thank you so much for joining us today.
Welcome. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. So
happy
I was
happy to be here.
Yeah, for sure. As we were organizing all of this together, we realized that Mary and Sue have a combined 90 years experience in the Montessori world. So we are obviously really excited to hear from you, on this particular topic that so many Montessori schools really struggle with. And it's a detriment to our ability to really grow. So I know we're going to dive into that. But Mary Lou, I'd love to hear from you on your experience with this particular topic. You've been doing this for so long. I'd love to hear from you on this.
Sure, Denise. I actually the founding head of a school for 45 years. And so I do know the problem quite intimately. And I think it takes there's different stages in the development of a school. And so the very, very beginning, when I first started the school in 1974, I had to make a case with parents about the importance, most importantly, of a 3-year cycle, 3 to 4 year. And that's very basic to the Montessori philosophy, that we have a mixture of ages, and that each child actually has a role within that classroom community. And most importantly, as the child, our goal is to follow the natural development of the child, right? And so what I sort of helped our parents to see, and really it's going to the source, the parents. As I say, the children don't drive themselves to school, the parents drive the children. So what we have to get across is the role of the child as they pass through this developmental plane. And so what I stressed with parents was the importance of the culminating year. It was sort of, if you will, the capstone year. And once they understood the importance that, we are not forcing learning, we're giving them, the children, the gift of time, right? We're giving them an opportunity to unfold, not in a traditional method where you have 1 year period, 1 year of this, 1 year of that, but over the cycle, the developmental cycle, the child actually gets to develop and go from that sort of self-centered period of all about the ego to actually getting to that point of being able to serve others. And that's sort of, if you will, the spiritual development of the child as well. So I don't want to get lost in that, but I think it's very, very important to remember the children in that last culminating year have an important role, which is to help others. Does that help you a little bit in terms of just get it? So my first approach was to really talk to the parents and to talk about the importance and get them excited about the opportunity for their children to get to the point of being ready, if you will. And we talked about readiness, signs of readiness for that stage in the child's life. And we can go through that later. So there were, we definitely had the problem in the beginning, but once we got it across, it became something that our parents at the Cobb School in Simsbury really looked forward to. And I think what helped us is we had one little girl from England who, when she really entered our program, said to her mother, "Mommy, I'm so excited. I'm in the splendid day." And so we actually, in our handbook, called it the Splendid Day, because from the perspective of the children, it was that extra time, that one-on-one time, the individualized opportunities with the children and the teacher, most importantly, the group time, the outdoor time. It was that very special time with just the oldest children in the classroom without the youngest.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and creating that anticipation for those children
Very
helps families understand.
Yes.
Absolutely. For sure. Thank you for sharing that, Mary Lou. And Sue Pritzker, if you could give us a little bit of background and your experience on this topic. I know you're currently ahead of school right now, and again, thank you for taking time out of your very busy day as this is the beginning of the school year. But I'd love to hear from you on this as well.
I would definitely want to just scaffold on what Mary Lou was saying, because it really is about who the child is at different stages of their development. So the goal really is to have the parent community, that triangle we're creating between the parent and the school, that there's that deep understanding that we're preparing the right environment at every single age level, and that at that earlier age, the child is going to have those hands-on experience. The materials that are in that room are designed specifically for the child at that age, and that moving them before they are really ready, before they reach that next level, talking about what those stages of development are, and how we see when the child is really ready for the next plane of development. And that if we move them before they're ready for that intensely social environment, then we really take away from them the opportunity to fully experience sensorially. And the importance of really being connected to other humans, that connection that you make with their peers in the Children's House environment. If they really do it at the stage that they are ready for it, that will stay with them. That will be a lifelong experience that they have of being a leader. So there's those combination of things that it's based in Montessori, deeply based in Montessori philosophy, that we prepare the environment that's specifically designed for children, and that the goal for us is for them to take full advantage of it. And to stop it early will really truncate the total experience that they have. And that's kind of where I will tend to go with those parents who are on the fence or unsure of exactly whether they should make that leap or not.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And this is a really good lead in to the beginning of our conversation, Sue, where we really want to paint a picture for our families about how important this third year is, but do we truly understand the importance of it? And I think that's part of the journey too, is do we fully understand that piece, and how do we articulate it to our families? So we have some bullet points that I want us to cover, just to reiterate the importance of that third year, so we can remind ourselves as we really think about how to articulate this to our families. So one of the main pieces is just mixed age classrooms. They should be balanced. Mary Lou, if you could talk a little bit about that balance. As we all know, Montessorians, it's really important to have, but we struggle to maintain that balance.
Right. No, this is really very basic to Dr. Montessori's discoveries, and generally in a primary classroom in the Children's House, you would have a third who are in the 3-year-old range, a third in the 4-year-old range, and a third in the 5-6-year-old range. So when you create this, which and now in some traditional environments I've heard them call it family grouping, what you're really creating is a community whereby you're providing this very enriched environment that is based on the children's needs and tendencies. And you are providing the children an opportunity to rub shoulders with children of varying ages and abilities. And as the older children, as the youngest children that go through the program and get to be at that 5-6-year-old stage, if they get to turn around and share with that which they have learned, which not only reinforces what they've learned, but it builds confidence in them and self-esteem. It's a very important part of the program. This is why this is such a holistic program. And I just want to add these are the formative years. And in terms of a tremendous amount of research has been done on the value and the importance of the formative years, because from that, everything else springs forward. So when you think about it, not only are we giving the children this very enriched curriculum that is basically a continuum from which they can explore. This is all about self-discovery, right? But we're there as guides to guide them through this developmental cycle. But what's wonderful is when they get to be 5, 5.5, 6, they're in that range, you begin to see this aha. I get it now. And that comes from within. It's not the adult telling them or having the children memorize something that they'll soon forget. It's if you will, learning from the inside out. So when you take them away from that opportunity, if you decide to move schools, it's as if they miss out on that self-discovery, which is the most important part of learning. So I would just say that's my addition. Yeah.
That was beautiful, you know, for them to really, that self-discovery, we're taking it away. And for those that are attending, take note of that, because I feel like that right there is a key phrase we can use with our families, because ultimately the parents, they want them to have that full experience, but maybe they don't truly understand
Right.
the element of that. So I'm imagining we're going to have a lot of those come up, so I may highlight them more and more and make sure everyone has their notebook. But yeah, that's a key piece. So I'd love to hear from you when we're talking about, you know, the explosion that happens at the 5 to 7 year range. You know, tell us more about that and how we can truly understand that piece, which of course is that final year in primary or Children's House.
I think it's very interesting because we actually know, especially over the years of having a program that has primary and then elementary, and then as soon as you add an elementary program, you start to really be able to see that period of time between 5 and 7, and where you actually see the signs of the child going into the second plane of development. Parents can really understand it if you can be as concrete as possible, which is the child becomes more social. All of a sudden they want to work with other children in a group, so that individual activity is not as attractive to them anymore. I mean, it can be simple things like them losing the fat along their waistline and having their first teeth fall out. All of these are signs that the child is physiologically changing. And usually those physiological changes also have really signs in cognitive changes. So the child does become more social. And then elementary environment, especially if they stay in a Montessori program, becomes really the perfect environment, the prepared environment for them at that age. Until that time, they're going in and out of needing the hands-on materials. They're going in and out of needing to have individual work and also having that group work. So that mastery that Mary Lou talked about and all the research that's been done, I think if we crystallize it down to something very simple, in the Children's House program, the children are getting the opportunity for deep concentration. And with that concentration comes the sense of mastery, because with a concentration, you're choosing what you want to do. You are actually doing it, and then you're experiencing your mastery of it. If a child gets that from age 3 through 6, or before they're ready to move into an elementary, that's a lifelong neurological skill that they've developed. And the other part of that is that connection, because all children feel that sense of accomplishment when they're feeling connected. I mean, I know there's a lot of research now that says that children that don't feel connection to their peers are the children that have more anxiety. Adults who don't have connection have a greater tendency toward depression. Connection is an important psychological experience, and that's what you get in that primary classroom. And if you move the child at age just around 5 to 6 or 7, you may not have the perfect environment for them to feel that mastery and the readiness to go on.
So can I add just one thing, Deneen? The connection you're speaking about is also very unique with the Montessori Guide. And we mentioned, of course, it's this community of children connecting. But one of the things that I think is unspoken, needs to be spoken more about, is the relationship and connection between the child and the guide. It's really unlike any other experience in school that I know about, because the guide in this instance is really a facilitator helping to support that child's development. And what happens in a very good Montessori school is, of course, you have to build trust. And that trust is very powerful between the adult and the child, because what's happening is the adult gets to know that child really intimately, because they are hopefully together for at least a 3 to 4 year cycle. And that's interesting, because over time, having been in a class for a long time, you get to really know those children. And when you're just in a different kind of conventional kindergarten, it's a 1-year deal. You don't really get to know a child as intimately and as authentically as you might, I believe, in a Montessori environment. And you get to see things like, oh, this child's a little slightly off today. Maybe they're tired. Maybe they're getting sick. And by the way, they get to see you off sometime. And you can be open about that and say, I actually have a headache. I'm sorry I'm not myself today. I'd appreciate it if you would help me support the younger children. So the relationship that Sue is talking about, one of connection, is extremely powerful. And again, it's one of those things that I think we could talk a lot about, just that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And Janine, I just say that as I look at our first frame here, that the one thing that we didn't talk about yet is this idea of that joy of learning. And so I think that's the other thing that the parent wants to see. They want to see the child that jumps out of the car and wants to come in, and the child that will share with their parent more and more in that last year exactly what they're doing. So that joy of learning is another thing that stays with them when all of those other pieces are in place.
Yes, absolutely. That's a really good point. And the both of you brought up something really important I think we need to remember when we're talking to parents. And one of those is just making sure that we can articulate to the parents that we know their children so well from a scientific standpoint. And you can't get that anywhere else. You can't get that at a child care center. You're not going to get that in a traditional kindergarten program. And I know we're going to talk about traditional versus Montessori, which I'm excited for that one. But it's so important, I think, for parents to see us as scientists, not just child care providers. That is what sets Montessori apart from any other program. And so being able to talk to them about, their child losing their tooth and what that means for them developmentally is a huge part, and something we need to continue to articulate to them, even at an early age. Most families have more than one child, and are going to be thinking about these pieces as they come in. But another thing you talked about, Mary Lou, is just trust. Trusting and knowing your individual child. And we know that parents are nervous. They are probably more nervous than they ever have been. Will my child be okay? Will my child get to the world and know what to do, this ever-changing world? So there's anxiety built up in the families that we work with. And for them to know that their guide, their child's teacher knows their child to the core, and is then able to provide and connect them to the environment. Again, you can't get that anywhere else. That's a huge selling point for us.
I think it is, and I don't think we can underestimate it, because as you said, I think more than ever, in my experience, there's a lot of deep anxiety in society for a lot of reasons. And I think we have to remember, as the adult in the environment, and I've said this to my teachers, that we really, it's a big deal for parents to turn their children over to us. And we have to. This isn't on the slide, but we often speak Montessori speak, and we forget just to talk from the heart about what it is that we do. Yes, from the mind, but also from the heart. And so it's really important for them to know, most importantly, that we actually love their child and we want the best for their child. And we're going to be there to support their child in the good times and in the bad. And, we have to realize that today, parents they're really nervous about a lot of different things. And I don't mind saying that with the opening of schools all over the country, all I could think about was, gosh, I feel for the teachers. I feel for the administrators in schools today, because there's so much anger and hostility in the world. And yet what we're providing is the most loving, peaceful, kind, generous, open, trusting environment possible. That's what we need to show in everything that we do, which is being present, it's being there, It's listening, it's being empathetic, it's being kind, and it's being that role model for the child and for the parents that we would so much want for the world.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And just for our attendees, I know that there's somebody that chatted in a question through the Q&A. If you wouldn't mind actually putting that in the chat, because I'm presenting the slide and I'm not able to see your Q&A questions. So if you do have a question, just put it in the chat and I'll make sure to keep an eye on that as we continue our conversation. So a side note, Sue, did you want to add anything to that, or should we move to the next slide?
Oh, I think we should move on. There's Anastasia.
Awesome. And so let's just recap, what the final year looks like. I know there's a few more bullet points we want to go through with this, but I think it's really good to, again, hit home with this.
So I can jump in there. So one of the things that's important for parents to know, because they don't get into the classroom, is for you to really speak specifically about what happens during the day for the child. And I don't think it's in our slides. I'm sure Mary Lou has something similar, but we do have a special parent night every year, and at which point we sort of target the families of the children that are finishing their first year in the program. And it's called the final year or the culminating year and beyond. And that's where we go through, the teachers have a special presentation to go through what that looks like, and especially for to experience what's going to happen for their child the next year. We almost always use materials so the parents see how the materials advance from the very basic materials. A lot of parents understand the basic materials. They can look at sensorial materials and think, oh, I understand that's about size discrimination or, sound discrimination with the bells. They love those materials. But they might not realize that we have actually whole group lessons, individual lessons. We might have talked to them about most of the lessons are individual lessons at the primary. So they know that the teacher is giving a lesson to their child and that devoting that moment to the child as they're having a lesson. And then also that they would have small groups. But a lot of parents don't know that we sometimes will actually orchestrate the small groups for a group of 4 to 6 children that all have the same need for the same lesson at the same time. So it's really important to give the picture of exactly what's happening in the classroom for those children. When you do that parent night or when the parent comes in at any time, really talking with them about the sequential presentation of materials. Telling them there are hundreds of lessons in mathematics and they start here and they end there. I always love to tell the story that we had a child once who was pretty precocious, but explained to their parent that they were ready to finish at Children's House now because they finished the last math material on the last shelf. So the child's sense of sequential accomplishments is there too. But those are definitely images, and then really talking about that mastery. So that repetition is what builds the mastery. So in that final year, giving them the picture of what happens in that last year or what can happen in that last year for the child, because a lot of parents get stuck in thinking about what happens in the first year, and they don't really think about what the subsequent years are.
Can I just jump in there, Deneen, to say that one of the things that I did that I found very helpful for parents was to actually have their children invite them to come and have lunch and be part of the afternoon. And I think it's just something that, as a teacher gets more comfortable in his or her work in the classroom, we often have observations are very important, and we often have observations at the beginning of the day. And as Sue referenced, that we have obviously meetings, parent nights, and so on, orientation meetings about the school year. We talk about the whole program, but I do think it's important actually to think about inviting, and as I say, having the children invite their parents in to have lunch, and they can watch the whole process of the children setting the table and being served, and then going outside, because outside that time is really important, that activity time when they're outside doing their games. And I said to the teachers, that's important for you to observe, to see if they're interacting in a playful way, or are they growing off by themselves. So it's important that parents see that their children are part of that group. That's what they worry about, I think, is does my child have friends? Does my child play? Well, there's nothing better than to invite them in to see that, and then to see that we often start that afternoon program with it having a group lesson. The teacher gives a lesson on the more advanced materials within the classroom, and then sends them off to do their work either independently or in small groups. So again, I think it's invite the parents in. Don't be afraid to do that as the year progresses. And I think you will see it. It's sometimes the seeing that believes it. You know, they will say, oh, now I get it. But until then, we might fail at being very abstract, and we have to be careful of that. Let them come in. Welcome them.
Yes, absolutely. That's such a good reminder.
I think one more thing is at Child Peace, one thing we do is something called open classroom. So all the primary classes have the opportunity for the parents to sign up, and it's very, very relaxed and informal, but it's after school. And the child comes in, the teacher might help them think about what material or what work that they know how to do. And then the teacher is not giving lessons, but the child's just showing their parent the classroom. And we usually have maybe somewhere between 4 to 6 children at a time in an open classroom with their parents. And those are very, very impactful moments for the parents. And I don't think on this that we caught yet the silent journey and discovery is another extraordinary tool for the parents to be able to have some exposure to what that culminating year can be like in the primary class.
I agree with that, Sue. It's wonderful.
Yeah. That's a great reminder as well. I had the fortunate opportunity to work a couple journey and discoveries, and I can't say enough about how incredibly transformative that experience can be. And you know, by the end of it, you feel like you really know your parents well, and they get to know your guides really well, because they're teaching them like they would guide their children. And so that experience, that firsthand experience, is, you can't replicate that.
I agree. Parents tell me that's when they have the aha moment, and it's for the same reason the children do. They get to actually experience the materials firsthand, and to experience the relationship with the teacher with the children. So it is very powerful.
So we do have a question from Jennifer. So it's going back a little bit about the full range of ages, and how we ideally want a third for our 3-year age span. But in reality, sometimes it looks like 2/5, and 1/5. So it's heavy on the first and second years and very light on the first year, or the third years. Jennifer says she's already offering an elementary and adolescent program after the toddler and primary program. So do you have any thoughts or tips on how to build that program so you have a very balanced age group?
You want me to start?
I actually think that,
you want to start, Sue? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think also, I was just thinking that some of our slides actually cover some of that. If we slip on, we might be able to talk about building that program.
Is this the slide you're talking about, Sue?
Yes.
Yes. I
Awesome.
think that might give us some guidance there.
Yeah.
Perfect. Do you want to lead us into the slide?
So I think that what we're talking about there is really specific to Jennifer's question, because Jennifer is not the only person that experiences as those smaller, older groups. But what you have to do is, as you start your elementary program, And you really are not going to be able to start your elementary program until you're retaining your kindergartners. So it's a balance, a back and forth. You have to have X number of years where you have that strong kindergarten group. And excuse me for using kindergarten, it's kind of, it's ingrained in me, but the oldest child, let's say, because they're not always chronologically kindergartners, sometimes they can be older. What you have to do is have a bigger master plan of where it's going in, and in how many years will it take you to develop an elementary program, and then you work backward. When we do our planning, every single year we actually do our spreadsheets for the classrooms so that we can actually see those age delineations. And for us, we'll also, because we have a toddler program, we'll have actually 4 sections, and one would be the children that might be there for 4 years. So we have a spreadsheet of children, of all the names of the children, and then by the number of years they'll be in the classroom. Then you start to see where that balance is. And internally, we're talking all the time about how many children will be in that group. When we are, often when we're in, we over the years also have been very careful to not exclude the children who are 4 or 5 in our program. We don't add so many of them to the primary class, but we don't outright say, oh, we don't take kindergartners, because we really feel like, especially for us, we often get families that may be transferring where they have an older child coming in and they need a younger child that needs a placement. So we've had a lot of successes with children that are 4.5 or older when they come into the primary program. So that's another way that you're going to really make sure that you get a balance. And my feeling is that if the parents don't see what a full age mix looks like, you're going to start to lose them. But I think every school might have a little drop off, but I think as long as you have a group of 8 and let's say if you have an average of 25 children, if you can keep 6 to 8 of those older children, hopefully 8, then you're going to have a fairly balanced classroom, especially if they've been there for their full experience. Thoughts, Mary Lou?
Well, I think what I would add is we got very intentional about this, because a couple of years ago in Connecticut, it seemed that one by one, our local towns started to offer all-day kindergarten. So that was a game changer in a way. Suddenly it was all-day kindergarten, and parents, and all the parents were lashing on to the the latest No Child Left Behind or whatever. There have been so many things, but so what we did intentionally was to start the year with an orientation meeting at the beginning of the year for everyone, but very quickly pulled the parents in of the oldest students, or potentially the children who would be turning 4.5 or 5, and speak specifically about what it is that we offered and how it differed. We were very deliberate in, if you will, our marketing attempts to say that this is, we really respect what other schools are doing, but we want you to understand what it is that we are doing and how important it is to the classroom itself. 2 aspects. It's very important to the community, right? But it's very important to that individual child, to the individual children, because in a way it's like saying, the first year, if you think of a 3-year cycle, that's an introduction. Then you have the second year, which is more the exploration, and the third year is the icing on the cake. So it's really important for the parents to understand what happens, and we gave meetings on that to display the kinds of materials that the children would be introduced to and that sort of thing. So I can't emphasize enough how important it is to do that at the beginning of the year, because if you wait until January, you've probably waited too long. They're already checked out, wouldn't you say?
I agree. And I think if we went through some of the things that are on this slide as well, you'll if you are losing children to your public school, then talk to the public school. Find out what kind of arrangements could be made so that you could keep those children. Get quotations from the principals of those public schools that say how well the Montessori children do, how easy it is for them to transition at first grade as well as kindergarten. So start building a little portfolio of information. There are many schools as a consultant that I've advised to just give maybe for a year or two, a tuition discount for your kindergartners. Because once it might not be something you do for a long term, but once the parents see those children in the room and what that whole picture looks like, they really will have a greater desire to follow through. Another thing is, maybe you have to have policy that helps you with this. We now are a large enough school at Child Peace that we do have a requirement. We let people start at that first year, but at the beginning of their second year in primary, they are signing a commitment that they will be staying in the program until the child has finished their last program, or completed the primary and are going to a first grade program somewhere or an elementary program somewhere. And so there are financial commitments to that as well. So I'm not sure, it's hard without having Jennifer on the line here to know exactly what her need is, but I'm hoping that got to some of what she was looking for.
Sure. Sue, that's really interesting that you have that policy in your school. I know a couple other schools have thought about that, tried to softly implement it. Can you speak to a little bit about your experience with that? What feedback have you gotten? How is your community accepting that very, strict, this is what we ask you to commit to?
Well, I think it's never going to, yes, it is. It's a hard question because on one hand, you just want people to commit to the program because they understand it. And I would not be truthful if I said we don't lose some kindergartners, because sometimes we do. But there are a couple of things that we've put in place. One thing is that they have to commit to the full cycle. So we have a program deposit. If they do not finish that cycle that they've committed to, they will lose their program deposit. And that is really what's in place. And I think people really understand that. One thing that really works from the very beginning is if parents understand, or they can hear that what their child got when they walked in as that young 3-year-old, what they got in terms of those older children, the teachers, the older children that taught them, that dynamic experience that their child got to see older children reading and writing and to see the breadth of the work that could be done. And that really it's a family responsibility to give back by having their child stay through the whole cycle. And of course, that doesn't reach every family, and some families have needs. We do have a tuition assistance program, and I will say that if a family tells us that it is a financial need for them not to finish that year, we do ask that they apply for financial aid, and we will do our best to meet their financial need. And that way, at least there's a process we have so that it says that's our commitment. And also our tuition assistance is always, it's prioritized for the children in their culminating or final year at every level. So this would be true for the children in their last year at the primary, third year, and sixth year. Obviously, third year is not as much of a problem, but sixth year we have the same situation. If the people in the group have elementary programs, they know losing those 6 years is a problem as well. So we prioritize disbursement of tuition assistance for children in their final year of a level. Does that help?
Yes, absolutely.
Yep.
And thank you for thoroughly explaining that, because I agree with you. It's similar to losing our third years in the children's house to losing our 6th years in your elementary program. It's devastating for that whole, whether you have a 6 to 12 classroom or a 6 to 9 and 9 to 12, it is still devastating because think of how much those 6th years give to the community. And it truly is a responsibility. And I think if most parents, would understand that and of course want that outcome for their child. because we want our children to be responsible citizens, to really change this world. So thank you for bringing that through. Mary Lou, did you want to add anything?
Just that we didn't require it. I hear what Sue did and does at her school. And I decided that to go slightly in a different way rather than require it. We really talked about the importance of the cycle during the admissions period. And of course, I know, and you know, that most parents are focused on their 3-year-olds at that point in time. But we did talk about the whole program and how important it was, and that we would be reviewing this in terms of not only in terms of their own child, but in terms of the community itself. And you know what really helped is having times when our parents could talk to other parents. And it's that testimonial that helped keep them in our school. So to be honest with you, we didn't lose many. I pondered the question a couple of years ago when we suddenly saw the outburst of all-day kindergartners. And then I said, okay, we need to meet the need of those parents by really looking carefully at, are we offering enough in our after-school program, which we did have, but we now go a little longer in that program. So we wanted to make it affordable. We wanted to make it more accessible. And in so doing, be able to retain those students and really highlight to the parents the importance that those children have within the community as they go through their time at Cobb. They become the elders. And so it's parent to parent, but also child to child. So we did a lot of having our children visit the elementary program, or when they're younger, they're 4s, they begin to visit to the extended day, what we call the extended day program. So I think we have to be very fluid, we have to be very welcoming, very open, and we really have to convince our teachers that they are not there only to educate the children, but to educate the parents each step of the way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. What a wonderful
point.
I think
I agree with Mary Lou, and I think this is for administrators. When we get together as groups of administrators, it's a real philosophical question of whether you do take a step when you put those requirements in for the families. And that is definitely something that you have to look at your own school culture, and you have to really make a decision of, like what will work. What's been interesting to me is that it gives security to other families. Other families feel that when everyone understands what commitment they're making, it supports other families who are making the decision to commit fully. So I think there's always a balance, and everyone has to make that cultural decision within the school.
Absolutely. We've got a question from one of the attendees. Josie had asked, if a deposit is required, what does that look like? And I imagine, Josie, you're asking just like the structure of how you can employ that particular piece of your program, Sue. So if you wouldn't mind answering, if a deposit is required, what does that look like?
So there's a program deposit that the parent gives as a part of their application. So when they start, there's a program deposit, and it's probably at Children's, at the primary, at our school, about equal to the half-day program for the primary level. And the parent is committing that they will have their child continue through the full cycle. And if they do not finish the full cycle, then that deposit is not returned at the end. So if they leave before that last year, then they would not receive that deposit back. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting idea. I've actually never heard of that, and I feel like that's a genius idea. That's a good trick. So let's move on to the next slide, which is helping parents see the value in your program. Mary Lou, if you wouldn't mind bringing us through this. This is such a key piece, and of course we've talked about it in and out of our conversation, but let's really hit helping parents to see their value, see the value in the program.
And I think that's key because, our children, we often say this, really, there are many children who never go home and talk about their day. I mean, the parents invariably will say, how was your day, right? And I often approach the parents or talk about that in the orientation meeting, that most likely your child will tell you about the snack that they've had or what they did on the playground. But there's much more that goes on in the Montessori classroom. So we talk about that right up front. And we alluded to it earlier, all about the things that we do in the full day program with the extended day. But there is nothing quite like having maybe an alumni panel, or to have parent testimonials, or just examples. Have a meeting. As I said to you, we're very intentional about bringing the parents of potential extended day students together to first allow them to observe the classroom, and then we showed them examples of the work, and we actually involved the children in the meeting, the eldest children. So the children who had turned 6, so this was often in the spring, would sit in on the meeting and talk about what they liked best about their extended day experience. Invariably what came out, which I think we can't talk enough about, is the leadership. And who wouldn't want their children to become good leaders, strong leaders? And I think we have to be very clear that that is one of our goals, is to help the children to become leaders within their classroom and in the whole school community. So there is a very definite role that we give to those children. So not only are we allowing them the gift of what I call the gift of time, in the sense of this is not a one-year program. This is a cycle of development. It's very important to understand that the planes of development are allowing the children to develop at their own rates of speed, and allowing them the opportunity to have the aha moment. So we want that learning to come from the inside out. And the more we can talk about that, the more we can bring the parents together with the children to see this, whether it be also, we involve, every year we have an opera, and the extended day children are in that opera. They have a small piece in the opera, but that is another opportunity for the parents not only to see the child at that point in his or her development, but also in relationship to the whole school community and to the elementary program. Does that help, Deneen? A little bit?
Absolutely. That's such a good, summary of what it is that we really want to, articulate to our parents. When we've got like alumni parent testimonials. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I know most of our members are curious about that. When we think about, online presence, we have alumni profiles, but how do you collect those, especially if you're a younger program? Like let's say you're a 5 to 10 year school, and you have some alumni, but how do you keep in touch with them?
You want to answer, Sue, and I'll jump in after you?
Well, I'd like to add to what Mary Lee was just saying, that I think what parents really, really want to know that happens for their child is that their child is seen as an individual and that they are really taken seriously. And it's not a small part of what we have to offer in a Montessori program, that a child feels like the adults in their life at school take them seriously. And I think that can be the foundation of the conversation with parents, that that the child's work, whatever it is valuable. So even if the child is not doing the highest level of mathematics, and if they're doing painting over and over, we see the value in that. So I think that hearing the testimonials that we have, whatever quotes we gather, it really needs to be about that value of the child. What is the child experience while they are in that room? Because actually Child Peace has been around for 40 plus years, but it's only half of that time that we've had an elementary or adolescent program. So we're not in a different, we don't have a huge alumni base yet, but it's been, when we just finished our strategic planning for the school, we actually included alumni in our strategic planning. We have an outcomes night every year, and in that outcomes night, what we do is include alumni. And so when we're actually talking about what their experiences were at the school, we have high school students, and if we can, college students come back and talk about, in the particular areas, what it was that they experienced. What do they remember That is the single most impactful thing for parents to be convinced over the long term. And there's a specific format for that night, but the most, I think the most telling part of that is how the former students feel about their experience. And then last thing that we do is invite our high school seniors for, we invite them close to the end of their high school year to come and have this great experience. And luckily we have a great photographer in our school, and he has captured images of those children from the time that they are very, very little. And they come in and we have this slideshow running, and these high school seniors, and many of them, of course, still talk to each other, know each other, are best friends. And they go, oh my gosh, look at you when you were 3. Look at that's really funny. Or who was that? And it's just this excitement about being connected to the school. And, but if you're a young school and you don't have that yet, then, the parent experiences, maybe even bringing in the teachers or the principals of schools your children go to, so they can talk about what they see are different in those children, what qualities they bring. And almost always those principals will say, oh my gosh, the Montessori kids bring so much in terms of the collaborative, the ability to collaborate. They're the negotiators. They're the problem solvers. They're the children that can take the big view of things. So the principals that those of the schools those children go to, even if you only keep them through the primary level, are great advocates for what they've experienced.
Absolutely. And I do want to make sure that I respect both of your times, because I know we're running out of a little bit of time. We've got about 10 minutes left and a whole bunch of content, I know. I feel like there should be a part 2 of this because it's such a good conversation. But we have Kara, who had chimed in about your comment, Mary Lou, of observation being really important. So she agrees that observation is the key to retaining, but she has some teachers who feel observation in general is disruptive. They require the observations for prospective parents, but they don't push much for transitioning because some of the teachers feel it's hard for the classroom or hard on the classroom. How do we convince our teachers?
It's a good question, and it's not that I've not heard this before. I think that I'm the first to say, having been in the classroom for over 30 years, I always told my teachers, I know that feeling of having parents come in can be a feeling of like anxiety. You suddenly feel like you're on stage. But again, Sue had an idea about certain groups of parents. It could be at lunch, it could be at recess. But I think what we have to be careful of, and I told my teachers this and they've come to see it, is that we have to be careful not to sort of shut parents out. I emphasize the importance of developing a collaboration and a partnership with the parents. If we are there, and we all agree, we're there to serve the child and her needs, then we need to really embrace the fact that what we are going to do is go into partnership. And so it's really, really important to at least have that open-minded attitude. If we don't, that actually produces more anxiety. So I think you could open this up for a simple lunch, or it could be a simple tea. It could be an after-school thing. You could do it in a variety of ways, but I think it warrants a healthy discussion. And what are the fears? And sometimes I realize at my school, we would laugh about it a little bit. Observing is really important, just getting out to observe. But I don't know many teachers, and I felt the same thing. I'm guilty of it. It's hard to get out of your classroom. It's hard to go and observe another teacher in your own classroom. So this whole idea of observation, we need to kind of talk about that. That could be a whole nother time to be together. It's really foundational to our work, because if we don't observe our children, then we don't know what their needs are, right? So it's really important we embrace observation and not keep our parents out, because we should also be encouraging them to observe their own children, to know what it is that they need. So I'm not saying you snap a finger and you get it done. I'm saying it's something that you can put on your list of to-dos and work towards, because it's really, really important. And over a period of years, what I found at our school is we had two of our teachers suddenly said, ah, you know what? That went much better than I thought it did. And that built up that sense of, now let's all try this. So I don't think, I'm never a top-down person, you're going to do this or else kind of person. But I really encouraged it, and over time, they began to trust it. Make sense?
Absolutely.
It's odd at Child Peace. If you've been to my school, we're so open that all of our Children's House classrooms are in one huge 10,000 square foot open space. So the idea of, being, you can't hide anyway. So it's like, we're all open, all the time anyway. And also we have a training center in our town. So we just have this constant flow of people coming in. So I think it's just a little different for us because the teachers don't have that ability to close the door and quietly shut out the world. But we also do have our teacher self-evaluation program that we have in place includes peer observation. And I think it's just one little hint that I've made. I think I just offered this on the MA website too, is that if you do an observation in a teacher's classroom, you need to ask the teacher what they want you to observe. It's the simplest little key. But if you do that, then you're not just doing a general observation where the teacher is nervous about what you're looking at and how you are judging them. And I will say that the culture of observation at our school is really healthy. So part of it is our physical structure, but part of it is when teachers start observing each other and really talk with each other after their observation about what they saw and how they can answer, what they saw to answer the teacher's question, it just becomes really, really healthy. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, and let's face it, being a guide is really challenging. And it's difficult to open up your doors because you do feel like there's a high expectation of performance and making sure that things happen. But I think also helping your guides remember that this is a human process, just like it is for your children. You are on a spectrum of learning and figuring out your practice. And so observation, even if it's current parents' observation, is an opportunity to truly look at that process for yourself and be able to move forward, and just remember that you are also human. You are not a machine.
That's right.
Right. So we've got a slide here. I'm just going to run through this really quick because I know the next one I think is really important for our members. But here's a lovely chart here about traditional versus Montessori. And I think this would be a really good thing to have in front of you, administrators, to really think about those differences and remember to talk about them. Because I think, when we're looking at other programs and our families are looking at those programs, let's say 4 years old, they're getting ready to equipping them with this information gives them more knowledge to make the decision. And, as we know, some people are visual learners, some people are auditorial learners. So having something that they can physically look at, I think would be really helpful.
Yeah. We often use this kind of chart. I had something slightly different, but we handed it out and spoke to it at our parent orientation meeting at the beginning of the year, if not prior to that. So we definitely wanted our parents to be able to see this because they don't know. Again, we give our parents a bad rap sometimes. I had to get old before I really felt comfortable about this and say, parents are just doing the best that they can, but they don't really know. And so anything that we can give them like this and speak to will help them. Probably to me, one of the most important things is that in a traditional environment, and I was originally trained, the teacher does all the teaching and does all the thinking. And we talked about it earlier. This is about self-construction. It's about providing optimal environments that are enriched for children to meet their needs as they're passing from one developmental stage to another. It's entirely different. This chart can be a springboard to a very beautiful discussion about what really is happening in our Montessori classrooms.
Danine, I just thought about one thing. When we do our orientation for new students, we have a time where the children come with their parents, and we have maybe anywhere between 2 and 4 children together come at the same time, and their parents sit and talk with one of us, maybe our program director or me, but the parents actually get to watch the teacher giving a lesson. It's a basic little lesson that you might have on a transition shelf, but from the very beginning, the parents get to see that moment where a Montessori guide is sitting right next to their child and giving them a lesson. And they get that experience of sort of the sanctity of that. And it also helps them really understand how the teaching happens. So just that's another little thought that might be helpful.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that. So looking at action steps to take that reinforce retention, we've talked about making sure that we're, creating policies that are a deterrent to leaving, helping families face hardship, clarity around your elementary program. But I'm curious also to know more about asking families to choose another program if they really can't commit to that final year. Can we talk a little bit about that? Because I know many of our members face that and they're just not sure how to have that conversation and when to have that conversation.
So, well, you want me to jump in there? Or do you, Sue? Do you want to start? And I'll follow you. You go ahead.
You can. Okay. Go ahead. I'm the one that has that policy, not you. So you go first.
Yeah. No, I didn't force a family to feel like they had to commit to that program. My goal was to have them so excited about it that they wouldn't do anything else but stay for it. And that doesn't always happen, of course. But what I began to do, this is one little secret that I did. We, in the first semester of our school year, typically had a parent meeting at least once a month. We had the orientation meeting in September, and then we had the silent journey, generally at either the end of September. We had another meeting in October, another meeting in November, and one at the beginning of December. And I'm just sharing this because we found that after December, parents didn't typically come out very much. So we needed to sort of front load our parent education programs. And one of the things that we were very, very intentional about, as I mentioned, was the importance of the whole cycle and the children having the opportunity to complete that cycle. And so what I began to notice is, and this is my little secret here, is I know that for a lot of parents, they can't come to meetings, but it used to drive me crazy when a parent would make the decision not to return for the last year and say they just didn't know much about it. So I actually took roll. I mean, they didn't know it. I was writing down, I had my assistant write down who came and who didn't come. And I began to reach out to those who really didn't come to the meetings prior to that decision-making time. Because I wanted to be able to say, I'm just wondering if you have any questions. I know it's hard to get to evening meetings. Sometimes it's difficult to get to morning meetings, but you might have some questions on your mind. So I was proactive in trying to get to seeing what they were thinking about prior to January. Make sense? In other words, they weren't signing up when they came in, but I was taking note because it was often the parents who never came to a meeting who then announced to us that they weren't coming back. So I tried to preempt that decision.
Absolutely. Sue, did you want to add anything there?
Yeah, I definitely think that obviously I'm looking at this on the screen and going, whoa, that sounds harsh. And I think obviously it's much more nuanced than that. And I think what you want is for your teachers to know that you as an administration and policy-wide will be supportive of them and not just ask them to take any child that comes and and parents that aren't really committing to what you're doing. So obviously it would be the rarity that this would happen at our school as well. But it might be that you want to say to the family, if you really can't commit, it's so important for that mixed age group in our class. And that it's a bit like taking a space for a child. Now, obviously, you're not going to necessarily do that if it's a financial issue or there could be a lot of issues going on here. But we do have a policy that if you take your child out at the culminating year of Children's House, the younger sibling is not allowed to continue past the first year or wherever they are. So And that is because we're quite large school of 360 or 70, we have a huge number of siblings. And if a family is already, we already know they're going to leave to go to another private school for that culminating year, because if that's their need to go to that school, we want them to be able to do that. That's their choice as a family. But we don't want to have that repeated with the younger sibling, 2 years later. So, I mean, obviously this isn't going to happen all the time, but there is some times where you need to set policy that gives the message of what you are truly trying to do, what you're really trying to create. And obviously exactly what Mary Lou's saying, that's sort of the bottom line. What you're really trying to do is be in partnership with a family and have them understand what you're doing, have them see what value it is to your child, and all of the things that they're really getting from it. So hopefully those policies, as are all policies, they are there for the worst case scenario.
Okay.
Absolutely. So that concludes our slideshow, and I know both of you are incredibly busy. Would you mind sticking around for a couple minutes just to answer some questions that may come in from our live attendees?
Sure.
Awesome.
Yes.
Good. We've got one from Josie again. She's wondering, when do contracts go out for the next school year for both of your schools?
At my school, Deneen, we sent them out in February. And I have to be honest, over the years, my goodness, there was a time when they would need to be back by a certain date in March, and all the schools, we're an independent school, we would find that there was a coordination of a date that everyone had to get their contracts in. Sadly, a lot of our parents really don't they've lacked that sort of enthusiasm to get the contracts back. So it's like beating a bush on that one. So if anyone else has a good idea for me, but we send them out in February, we give them a deadline date. We tell them that, if they don't get their contracts in by this date, we will have to go to the people on the waiting list. Our problem, sadly, has been that we haven't had the waiting list. We're beginning to develop it again, but our school was pretty hard hit after the 2008 economic crisis. So that is in the process of changing as we speak, but February is our date.
Absolutely. And Sue, how about you for Child Peace Month?
Yeah, I would say it's closer to March, and that's in part because we have a pretty complicated budgetary system at this school, and it's just trying to get the tuition set that early, and we don't want to send them out until we set the tuition. So it's usually by the last, they're supposed to be in by the last week of March, which is when we have our spring break. We have a new picture here.
Right, there you are.
I see you guys.
Yes,
hi, Mary Lou.
Hi,
just to capture a couple other questions. So if you are here live, Sue and Mary are going to hang around for just a couple minutes to answer some questions before they head back into their lives. And you both are on separate coasts too. We've got a West Coast and an East Coast. So.
That's right. And you're in Brazil.
And I'm in South America. So we're all over the world.
Right.
So I found this question actually from Heidi. She asked this earlier, but she said, we see the big drop off between the end of early childhood, 3 to 6, and elementary, 6 to 9. Do you have any quick thoughts, or can this be a topic for another call? I think this may have been Heidi. I think you asked this earlier. Any quick thoughts or thoughts? So any quick maybe wrap up thoughts about, the drop off that we've got from the 3 to 6 and the 6 to 9?
Marketing.
Yeah,
we do a lot
of
marketing.
Yes, and actually it's funny because Josie just asked that. Do you do a lot of online marketing? Yeah. So that was serendipitous.
We do a lot. I call it Beating the Bushes campaign last year. I basically brought my administrative team together, and it's not a big team. I don't have as large a school as Sue, but we came together, a small group of us, and said, okay, we're really going to try to figure this out. We recognize that our number one competition are the public schools, not private schools, public, which is free. So it's very hard to compete against free. But therefore, you have to talk about what are the differences and what your child will gain that is not true in a public school. And one of the biggest differences is we're not testing them to death. But, we're not out running negative campaigns, but what we did was a lot of online, you name it, social media. We were definitely and continue to be out there with pictures of our children, and we made sure we were in major publications. And, it takes a lot of work. It's a huge task, as you might know, Deneen. But it's the more we could do, the more we found the turnaround.
Absolutely. And Josie wants to know, what online tool did you find most helpful? Did you find Facebook or Instagram to be more beneficial?
Sue, do you want to turn?
Well, yeah, we've been in a little different situation because generally we do have a wait list. But our bigger challenge was about a year ago, we ended up having the state, after however many, 32 years, telling us that we could not have our Montessori exception to have 25 children and also move our toddlers up before age 3. So all of a sudden we had a bit more of a crunch because we couldn't move our younger toddler, our 2.5 to 3-year-olds up. So that was really a challenge for us. What I would say is we're probably in a very different situation than the Cobb School, in that we're very urban, we're very central, so people know about us. So it's really, for us, it's more the issue of getting the right balance, and keeping the balance. So we have, this year we do have a person that works with both development communication, and we try to stay on social media as best we can, but we don't really do advertising other than making sure we have a media presence. We also have said, and I'm sure Mary Lou does this too, is that by having your head of school out there, writing on the Moss site, writing whenever, doing publications, if you can just have your school be noticed, because your head of school or your program directors are really taking part community-wide. So within the community, we make sure that our teachers, our elementary staff, they go to the meetings with other local private school administrators. So you just try to be out there so you are known. And it's interesting how that's really important. You have to get to the side of a soccer field, because that's where the conversations are happening, are on the side of a soccer field. So you want to make sure that you have parent ambassadors. So that's the other thing that we do, is that we really make sure our parents understand that they are ambassadors for the school, especially on the side of the soccer field, and they're not telling everyone on the side of the soccer field the bad story.
So to answer your Jocelyn's specific question, it would be hard for me to say between Facebook or Instagram. They're both beneficial, to be honest with you. And we do a lot of it. We are really daily up, talking about the Cobb School. And it's important to do that in our community. And it's made a significant difference. It really has. But I agree with Sue. It's being out there. It's being present. It's being known. I have to say, a strange realization after, developing a school over 45 years, just to those who may be working at a school or actually developing a school, know that it takes a lot of work and it does take time. I found myself saying, it takes about 45 to 50 years to develop a good, strong school to weather some of the storms that we invariably have come our way. And so be patient with yourself, be kind to yourself, because this is not an easy job. And, I would say for our young families, one of the parents told me one thing that really hit me. And I thought, wow, which is in terms of our communication, and we send out a weekly newsletter. That's a whole nother story, but it goes out to them. And she said, I only want to be able to read anything that you send in the time that it takes for me to come to a stoplight. That's it. And I thought, wow. So Yeah, when I looked at her, it made me rethink our marketing endeavors in terms of our newsletters used to be filled with lots of things about the Montessori materials and that sort of thing. We definitely do that, but we have a section where for those parents who really have no time but to read something at a stoplight, we still want to be able to reach them. So it's understanding your target audience, isn't it? Deneen,
Yes.
you know more about this than I do, but I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, so Mary Lou, that's actually a perfect segue into ending this, because your wisdom is so beautiful, and you said that so well. Just the realizations that we can take and use from what you offer to the process, because of course running a school, it takes time. Now, ideally, we don't want it to take 45 years to get it right,
Right.
But, that's why we have these calls, right? We welcome lovely people like you to be on here and really give us those tips that help us speed up that process, because inevitably the process is going to happen. The storms are going to come. It's just a matter of how foundationally strong you are to be able to weather those storms.
That's right. That's right.
Absolutely. Sue, do you have any last thoughts?
I just think that when you hang up the shingle that says you're Montessori, you just try to be the best Montessori you can be. And if you just keep coming back to that, and my theory is if you do what's right for one child, for that, whatever it is, that one child, then everything else is going to fall into place. So rather than thinking about all the policies, procedure, what are we doing that's right for that child in this moment as this decision comes up, and the rest of it will take care of itself. And can we do, it's so hard. I know Mary Lou and I are very interactive people, so it's like really hard to not be able to hear the voices of the people who are on the other side here. So it's like, I hope you got your questions answered, or that this was a stimulating conversation.
So Deneen, I just want to end by saying, if I may, I have a 14-year-old granddaughter, and she looked at me one day recently and she said, she calls me Mimi, and she said, well, Mimi, you're so busy now, you're consulting and you're doing all this. And I said, Annabelle, look at me. We have a world to save. You have work to do. I have work to do. And she keeps saying, you always told me we have a world to save. And that's what inspires me about Montessori. It's so much more than just going in and being, with the children and treating them like the little toys. We have a beautiful, beautiful mission. So let's stay mindful of our mission as Montessorians.
Absolutely. Beautiful words, Mary Lou. Beautiful. Well, thank you both again for being here. Thank you to our live attendees. We had quite the group today. I'm so happy that everyone was able to make time out of your very busy schedule. September is crazy. I know some of you started in August, some of you started yesterday. So, thank you for taking the time for joining this rich conversation. And again, Sue and Mary Lou, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you, Deneen, because you really pulled this. I mean, it's kind of magic that this happened.
She's incredible.
It happened. Yes, absolutely. And we'd love to have you two back, probably when it's not such a busy time. But you brought up some really good topics I imagine could be just as great conversations, observation, maybe even staff culture, that I know would be of interest to a lot of our member base. So we'd love to have you back if you're up for it.
Great. Thank you. And thank you for organizing this to me.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely. And thanks for everyone hanging in for an hour. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Absolutely. Everyone. Bye-bye.
You're going to close us off, Deneen. I don't know how to escape.